welcome to Mission 150, a podcast that tells stories from 150 years of Seventh-day Adventist mission to the world.
To find out more about the mission of the Adventist Church today, go to adventistmission.org. That's adventistmission.org.
We're so glad that you've joined us again on Mission 150 with me, David Trim.
And me, Sam Nevis. Today we have with us a very special guest, Ron Kuhn. Ron, you are the Associate Director of the Institute of World Mission, part of the General Conference over here, and a pioneer missionary. Well, not sure if pioneering in different ways, we're going to find out in a minute, but you certainly have plenty of experience being a missionary in different parts of the world.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us. Ron, you're originally from Brazil, but you have served the Adventist Church, specifically ADRA, the Adventist Development and Relief Agency, outside your homeland for many years. But where did it all start? So please tell us about where you grew up and what influenced you to decide to work for ADRA.
I guess when my mother and my father decided to have many children, they had a purpose. My father became Adventist, reading the Great Controversy, and he chose to put all of us in Adventist schools. And my mother was a Bible worker before she got married. When they started having children, they said, okay, we will now prepare these children to serve God in one way or the other. So we grew up in a small rural school, Adventist school, and then there was not many options at that. There were not many options at that time. We had 3 degrees: education, nursing, and theology. So I chose theology in our university in Brazil.
Well, before you finished your bachelor's, you were already traveling as a missionary. Tell us about that.
It was a visit from a General Conference youth leader, volunteer coordinator. At that time, they called Student Missionary Program. It was they were launching that program to motivate students to give 9 months or a year of their time to go as student missionaries. And so this tall guy, much taller than I am, and I'm
It's very difficult to find people like that.
He arrived on a weekend promoting the student missionary program in our university in Brazil. So Richard Barron.
Great preacher, Dick Barron, right?
Yeah, Dick Barron.
Great preacher.
Yeah, and he promoted this volunteer student missionary program, and I got excited, and I signed up. Lo and behold, I would wait for months and months and months, up to 2 years, until finally a call came.
And where did you get sent?
I was sent to Rwanda to work as a farm assistant manager.
What did that entail?
I was assisting all kinds of work in the university in Mudende in Rwanda. That beautiful campus there that eventually was destroyed by the war. So I was there many years before. I was 85. I finally got a call to go as a student missionary.
What was it like for a young man from Brazil to be working in Rwanda, and then after that, you got called to work in Sudan relieving famine? What were those experiences like? Would you say you underwent culture shock? And how did you adjust to a very different society and culture?
Well, when you move from a small community that has a unique way of life to another continent, another language, another cultural values and all this, of course, you encounter some major differences. And I remember the first shock is after a few days, I was there, and the Rwandese people are very friendly. So they knew me, my colleagues in work. So after a few days, they came and start walking hand by hand with me, and I looked to them as, what is going on? How can a man hold hand of another man, you know? Well, lo and behold, I found that was a sign of friendship. But in my culture,
it was a sign of something else.
It was a sign of something.
So yes, you learn. And one of the greatest things in the mission field is you have to suspend judgment. You have to start learning. Many times we think we're going to serve, we're going to do something. The first thing is mission. The first thing you do is you learn. And that's the example of Jesus. He came and he learned many years, mingle with people until his time was ready.
So were you able to adapt to the different culture relatively quickly, or did it take you a while?
Well, sometimes we adapt by making mistakes. And many, at that time, now I train missionaries.
Yes.
But at that time, I had no training. I didn't even see that book that we have nowadays in several languages, Passport to Mission, which is an orientation for volunteers and other missionaries. So yes, you learn by trial and errors and make mistakes. Sometimes you have to laugh at yourself.
Right.
So you finished a couple of years. Now you have experience in 2 different African countries, Rwanda, Sudan. And you go back to Brazil and you finish your bachelor's degree in theology, I presume.
Yeah.
So then what happens? You go to a local church and you serve as a pastor. Is that what happened?
Well, because of my previous volunteer experience, I had 2 years, and the second year was in Sudan, in the major famine of the Horn of Africa, that time when we had this, even the artists in the US making this, We Are the World, big concerts to get funding for the famine in Somalia, Sudan, Ethiopia, especially Ethiopia. So after coming back from that experience as a volunteer in Sudan and graduating, after 2 years, I had a call to go back to serve in Africa for ADRA again, but then with a regular call.
And where did you go?
I went to Mozambique.
It's a very poor country. Lots of needs.
That time was under war.
Even worse, civil war.
Civil war. And then Angola, civil war. So yes, it was sad. It was what we call at that time the Cold War.
Between the Soviet Union and the United States.
Yes.
Yeah.
Those years where they will support, or some governments would like to, especially in the independence movements in Africa, some were ready to give arms to people,
freedom fighters.
Freedom fighters, and Russia and Cuba were heavily involved, especially in Angola.
Were you married?
Yes.
How do you, honey, God is calling us to go to a war-torn country.
A poor war-torn country.
A poor, war-torn country.
Oh, I'm glad at that time there was no internet, so she did not know what was what to expect. And so, yes,
to find out.
After going back to Brazil, on the hindsight, look at our years. Those 2 years were crucial because I found let's say, the companion of life that will follow me into this many difficult places around the world. So Jackie chose to put up with all the inconveniences and the simplicity and go with me. So
how many countries? It was Mozambique,
Angola. We helped a little bit in Somalia on our way back to Sudan. We went back to Sudan. And so she stayed in Kenya, and I gave a hand in Somalia while we wait for our visa to go back to Sudan. And then in Sudan, we went back to South America and Bolivia, Peru.
But just before we get to that, Ron, how did Jackie, your wife, adjust to living in a different culture? Because you'd already had the experience. How was it for her?
It was difficult in the beginning, especially when we landed in Mozambique, because she grew up in a city. I grew up in a farm, so I was used to certain things, such as...
So being a farm manager, for example, was not a problem?
No, not a problem for me. I grew up in a farm. I lived more closer to nature and rats, snakes, and animals like that. So Jackie, when she arrived in Mozambique, I thought she was crying because the condition, the first time we arrived in a simple house, she cried. And I thought she was crying because the condition was very simple. But then later on, I discovered, we men, we shouldn't jump to conclusions very soon. And sometimes we want to fix things rationally. She just needed me to be there and be present, understand her. She was afraid. She didn't grow up with rats running around the house and the potential of having more insects and snakes and things like
Who
that.
are there to eat the rats.
Yeah. Eventually we got a cat, and eventually everything turns fine, and we actually had a very good time because we didn't have many things to disturb our, let's say, our new life together. And there was no internet, there was no TV, there was just a shortwave radio, some music we took in cassette tape. Most people don't even know that they existed.
That's right. What's a cassette tape?
Yeah.
You ask somebody under 30.
How did that environment play a part in your spirituality together with Jackie? How, because you didn't have any of the distractions, you did have many constraints. Did you feel closer to God and to her in that environment? Did it have any impact?
Absolutely, it had. You learn to appreciate more simple things in life, time together, a good conversation, nature, and above all, to depend more on providence, on God's day by day providence, because the unknowns and the difficulties were so great that you simply have to find joy in doing things in the middle of chaos. For example, many people haven't even heard that humanitarian agencies such as ADRA, we had 7 trucks and we had a small army. To protect those trucks to deliver food, the government allocated us about 40 soldiers with machine guns and bazookas on top of the cargo. To deliver aid, there was about 10 soldiers on top of each truck. We would never put all the trucks on the same convoy in case they were attacked. So we would take 3 or 4 and then loaded them with soldiers on top of the cargo, less cargo and a lot of soldiers with their gear there on top. And so, yes, and when you see
there's the prospect of real danger.
Oh yes, and one time we were actually in a mission and one of the truck stepped on a mine. Drove on a mine. And we were actually glad because it was an anti-personnel mine, and we were just going around in a village. And well, instead of a person being blown up, the truck lost the tire.
Oh, I see.
So it wasn't a mine designed to destroy a vehicle, it was just designed to kill somebody.
To kill people.
Right.
And fortunately, just a tire was damaged, nothing else. But there were many times when big mines would explode and vehicles, trucks, or tanks will be blown out.
So you describe an environment where you have very few distractions that build true connections with other human beings, not least your family. You need to stay close to God because the difficulties are real. Yet you are alleviating the suffering of people in a very tangible way, and it's never boring. As you were describing this, Ron, I can see why people keep coming back to the mission field. That you go back home, you have your 9-to-5 job, and you have lots of distractions, and there is less meaning and purpose in a life like this. And once you experience what you experienced, I suppose it burns within you that there is a more meaningful way to live.
Actually, what you are saying is so true, and that to the point that as you grow in the organization, you take more, let's say, management or responsible positions of responsibility in the management ladder, if you want to call that way, you actually miss the frontline action more, because you then move into the bureaucracy of the machine, and which is necessary to serve that purpose.
Right.
But let me tell you something about that experience. When we were called to go to Angola to start ADRA in Angola, and I never forgot, we both cried more because we didn't want to leave. The connections you made under tough circumstances are so deep and so meaningful that we really felt so close to the people, because when we arrived, there was so much need. Our church members, our few church members, felt so vulnerable there, and we prayed, we hired more people, we started some, actually a big relief operation, and they themselves couldn't believe we could succeed, because vandalism, the robbery, the anarchy in a place where it was ravaged by war and famine. We live in a little village that there were trenches around, so the village was protected by soldiers around at night. Mm-hmm. From the rebels not to attack. And so you make this connection. So yes, some of the connections we made at that place are still alive today. We still communicate with people, both Adventists and non-Adventists, and even missionaries from other organizations.
Right, because you have something in common.
Yes.
Yeah. But in 1996, you did leave Africa and you went back to South America. But you were still working for ADRA, and you were still working outside your native country of Brazil. Tell us about how you came to work in Bolivia and Peru, and what you did in those countries.
The work in Bolivia and Peru started many years before even ADRA existed. There was another agency, the church had an agency called SOS, Seventh-day Adventist World Service.
Yes.
And it was similar to community services, but then, and because of huge emergencies such as earthquakes in those parts of the highlands of Peru and Bolivia, there was some major emergency work that had begun decades before. So with the arrival of ADRA, that took a new shape, and more grants and more funding were given to us as a church to manage through ADRA. So the U.S. government had given through their foreign aid, USAID, major grants to ADRA to manage in Bolivia and Peru, food for work and development and relief and microcredit and several big scheme development. Mm-hmm. So because by then I spoke English, and because I had managed US-funded projects and European-funded projects in Africa before, they asked me to lead that in South America. So that's why I went back to my continent, but work in Bolivia and Peru, and they had those big grants. And right. So that's what I went to do there.
Right.
And eventually, after many years, you're back in Brazil. But by now, of course, it's not the same country as you left. How was that readaptation?
Yeah, it was what they call reverse culture shock.
Yes.
You go back to your country and you feel that you are lagging behind. The people are talking about things, music, the language of politics, and you are, oh, what is this? How is this? And it takes some time to connect again. So yeah, it was interesting. It was nice. We enjoyed it for that time being.
What did you do there?
I was the director for ADRA South America, as well as coordinator for Global Mission.
So in Brazil?
South America Division in Brasilia.
After 3 years back in Brazil, you went overseas again, but to a new continent this time. You were in the Asia Regional Office in Bangkok. So now, Ron, you didn't have responsibility for development and aid programs. Instead, you were managing the people who were supervising the programs and the projects. So how was that? And how did you find living and working in Asia? It must have been very different even to Africa.
Yes, Asia opened a new window for me too that was missing actually, as the most populous part of the world, as well as the one more affected by disasters. You know, if you look the whole world, you will have almost 40 or I don't know the percentage nowadays, but the percentage of the disasters in Asia are far greater than most other places on Earth. Yes, because of all the tsunamis, cyclones, whatever you call, and earthquakes and volcanoes and,
Yeah.
and floods and all those things. And also the sheer number of people there.
Yes.
So
Yes.
many natural disaster would take more lives
Yes,
in a more
yes.
densely populated region.
So yes, but on the aspect that's on the, let's say, on the work related to what I was doing, but on the aspect of culture and cultural values was also a new experience. For example, and Sam, you know very well, Latinos might have a problem with silence. Well, in Asia, it's very normal for you to have long periods of silence as you are talking with a friend, or as you sit and you drink a small cup of tea. It is silence is a language actually,
Hmm.
which makes Latinos uncomfortable if you have long periods of
Oh, if you
silence.
have 45 seconds, a minute of silence as you're eating
Yeah.
with somebody, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
Something's wrong.
So it was another new learning experience.
Another new learning experience, and very grateful, and I'm very grateful for such a learning experience with lots of cultural values. And even inside Asia, we think, oh, the Asians are all the same. No, they are not the
No.
same. There's a huge difference of values.
And what about, though, this you being in the position no longer of actually delivering the aid with your hands on, but being more of a manager? You talked about how you rise in the in organization, become more involved with the bureaucracy, but that's still essential. So how did you find that transition to that stage of your career?
Well, it's always how to handle this, because you have the tendency to keep doing certain things that you were doing, micromanagement, sort of speaking. But eventually, you learn that you can empower people better if you come with experience, and you can share with them than if you are just thrown into the fire without previous experience of certain aspects of the work. So I was, in one hand, I was blessed because I had previous experience from project, volunteer, project, country, and division experience. So now was easier to mentor and to help people, because that was the role of the regional office, is to empower, to mentor, and to help country office to succeed.
Okay, so you've worked in South America, multiple countries. You've worked in Africa, multiple countries. Now you are in Asia for a while. And then you don't have many more continents to work on. Next, it's North America. You're called to go to Canada and to help there. How was that transition, and what did you do there?
That was interesting. I never thought that a foreigner could lead the humanitarian agency in a developed country. And I was wrong, to my surprise.
To my doesn't happen often, but I was wrong on this occasion.
Yeah, I was wrong. A foreigner can, and that's also the beauty of countries like Canada, US,
and you were director of ADRA Canada, right?
Yeah. That's the beauty of a country that sees the experience and the value in people, regardless where they're coming from. Kudos to Canadians, Americans, and Europeans who think that way, because sometimes certain groups can be very proud to admit that somebody from outside can bring something valuable, to a contribution to the team. And so I started slow, and I thought, well, I have to learn first, and was a little bit uneasy at some circumstances. But the Canadians were very welcoming and very friendly, and so they were looking mostly for my experience in the front lines, and bring that aspect into the management and to the program in Canada.
How did your family adapt to America?
I would say the girls did well because they were studying in I would say an international school, or the mission school in Thailand had that strong international flavor, let's put this way. It was geared towards students who were from different parts of Asia and the world. So they were already studying in English, so it was not that difficult to transition.
How old were they when they came to Canada?
They were about 12 and 14, something like that.
You spent 4 years in Canada, and then in April 2012, you made the transition to your current job in the Institute of World Mission, where you've now been Associate Director, Ron, for 12 years.
12 years, congratulations.
Yeah,
it's a long time.
It didn't seem like that long, but when we were talking about your career before, in advance of this, it is 12 years. We've had colleagues from the Institute on our podcast before, but that was quite some time ago. So please tell us about what the IWM does.
Institute of World Mission is an arm of Secretariat.
In the General Conference.
In the General Conference. The World Church has a responsibility to train, let's use the old term, missionaries, moving from one continent, one country, one division to another. So as you take your family and you move from one place to another, there is an adjustment, not only of culture, but of values, work, and perceptions on how things should be done. And so to avoid a lot of problems as we had in the past, before the Institute existed 60-some years ago, we try to give the basic orientation for missionaries to acquire tools and resources to deal with what we call the roller coaster of transition, and to understand how to let's say to navigate in the subtle and very unwritten rules of cross-cultural service. And sometimes people come from cultures that are very direct or indirect, and you try to apply the same way in another culture and you find a wall. And you don't know what is happening. So the Institute tries to help people to navigate how to raise their children in a different culture, how to even take care of their mental health and physical health in different places. So there is a package, we will say, that an orientation for missionaries that the head office, the international office, the General Conference provides to families who are moving overseas. So that's what we do. We prepare. But the most important aspect of the Institute, I would say, is to help people to contextualize. Some people don't like that word contextualization, but it is to make the gospel understood in a different culture. So if you go with your family, if you go to another place, how can you understand the culture, the people in that place, and share Jesus with them, those who don't know? Another day I asked somebody, do you know who Jesus Christ is in Asia? And the person said, no, I don't know. So we think people know what we know when we refer to Christmas, to Eastern, to
the Ten Commandments.
People don't know. There are millions or billions of people who might have heard Jesus in the movie, and they don't know who Jesus is. So how do you start a conversation? Basic things like that, you know. And if somebody comes to you and asks, "Oh, do you know who was Siddhartha Gautama? Who was he?" Look, Siddhartha Gautama, who is this guy? Oh, it was Buddha.
Yes.
But you don't... So those are the things, that basic things sometimes that we take for granted, that if you move to another place, you have to start where people are, not where do you think that they are.
You've spent a lot of your life as a missionary and now you are living that vicariously through the missionaries that you train. So you are helping them to navigate all of the complexities that you yourself had navigated, and you are helping them to do that. How do you feel about that? What can you tell us about that experience of training other missionaries?
It is a learning experience even for us, because we used to say, communication is not what I say, but what the other understands. Mm-hmm. And so in order for us to even begin to teach something, we need to first to have a common ground or a frame of reference to be talking about. And when we come from all over the world, even our own Adventist values change and it's different. And some people put a lot of emphasis in certain aspects, certain things, but my point basically is I thought the Institute could be a boring place after working for Adler for so many years. The Institute was going to be after a while.
You're right. There are no soldiers on top of trucks with guns. No.
But the interesting thing is that every mission institute or every training we provide, we have different people, and the people make the Institute interesting. Because they come, and there are some very interesting trends happening lately. If you see and you often show, David, this picture of the first mission institute at Andrews, or one of the groups there, like 60 years ago. They are all white.
Yes.
From Europe and North America. You come to the institute now, it is a very different landscape. There are people from all over the world. Now we really can say it's from everywhere to everywhere. There are even our composition at the Institute nowadays. We are from everybody. The director is from
African,
Kenya. We have Latinos, we have Americans, we have Kenyans, Kenyan, South African, and an Italian who lived in many places. So the composition of the Institute is from all over the world. The missionaries who are serving the church and going across the world are from all over the world. We have from Pacific Islands, we have from North Asia, South Asia, everywhere to everywhere.
That's great. Ron, this has been brilliant, but we need to wrap up there. Thank you so much for being with us. And thank you for being with us today when our special guest was Ronald Kuhn, Associate Director of the Institute of World Mission. And we're glad that you were with us on Mission 150, which tells the story of the 150 years of Adventist mission to the world.
Please keep watching on the Seventh-day Adventist Church's YouTube channel, on Adventist Review TV, or listening on your favorite podcast platform.
To know more about Adventist mission work today, go to adventistmission.org. That's adventistmission.org.
And for opportunities for service today, go to vividfaith.com.
Join us each episode to learn, to be challenged, and to be inspired to become part of the mission of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.